me see. Am I there? Yes, I am here. Gentlemen, well, I should say ladies as well, because as there are ladies in this space and there are people coming in. A very good morning to everybody, and thank you for taking time to attend this groundbreaking webinar presented by the Africa Brand Summit in partnership with the Public Relations Institute of Southern Africa, and then the PLO Lumumba Foundation, Don Valley Brand Marketing and Reputation Managers, and of course, powered by Crowd Product, our registration platform. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Victor Sibeko. I am the host for today's webinar. I'm the past president of the Public Relations Institute of Southern Africa and the current CEO. Today's webinar is the first of the Africa Brand Summit monthly webinars, with much more needed discussions on critical topics that impact on us both as a people and a continent. Now, to lead us in today's discussion, ladies and gentlemen, we have Mr. Solly Moeng and Professor PLO Lumumba, who will be talking about a wide range of leadership issues that are facing Africa. Mr. Solly Moeng is the past president of PRISA and the CEO of Don Valley Brand Marketing and Reputation Managers based in Cape Town, South Africa. He's the founder and the convener of the Africa Brand Summit. And we have a very special guest, Professor Patrick Otieno, known as PLO Lumumba. He's a Kenyan by birth. He's an eloquent lawyer. He earned his LLB and LLM degrees at the University of Nairobi. And he served as the director of the Kenya Anti-Corruption Commission from September 2010 to August 2011. Since 2014, Professor Lumumba has been director of the Kenya School of Law. Ladies and gentlemen, I will be making a big mistake by not mentioning that Professor Lumumba is a staunch Pan-Africanist and has delivered several powerful speeches alluding to or about African solutions to African problems. Professor Lumumba is a person whom I may comfortably say he needs no introduction. He's simply a son of the soil. He is a winner of the 2020 Africa Brand Summit's Influence of Influencers Award, and Professor Lumumba is a founder of the PLO Lumumba Foundation and an official partner of the Africa Brand Summit. We're delighted this morning to be part of these discussions, which are a new phenomenon led by the Africa Brand Summit. Now, to take us through today's discussion is Mr. Solly Moeng, who will be conversing with the professor. And during the conversation or the discussion, we will allow for interaction as well. Over to you, Mr. Moeng.
Thank you very much, President Victor. People don't understand why Victor and I call ourselves presidents. We're both presidents or past presidents of the Public Relations Institute of Southern Africa. And Victor always says, once a president, always a president. Yeah. Right. Thank you very much. I'm really delighted to be here, Prof. It's good to see you again. I think we've grown this relationship over the past few years, and I really appreciate you each time. And but I need to say this, Prof, so that we go straight into the topic. We have good ideas in Africa, very good ideas. We have conferences, summits. We have awesome journalists. We say good things, but there's no implementation. Nothing happens. Now we have COVID-19 that's just hit us. We're going to see more and more leaders blaming COVID-19 and not themselves and some of the things they could have done, the squandered opportunities in the past to make Africa a winning, realize its potential. Why? Why are we not doing things right?
You know, Solly, there is a sense in which we may judge ourselves rather harshly. I hold the view that Africa is underachieving. That, I think, is our concern. In terms of articulation of ideas, there is no problem. Take, for example, in the area of health, which is germane because we are dealing with the pandemic called COVID. If you look at health, as early as the year 2000, I think 2001, we had the Abuja Declaration. African leaders met and said that health is a critical issue and that every African government should dedicate 15% of their budget to health and the health sector. Right. Several years down the line, I think it was 2001, several years down the line, it was actually 24th day of April, the year 2001 in Abuja. 20 years down the line, we are now being found literally naked in the face of this pandemic. And the reason is because the men and women that we give the opportunity to run our governments in most African countries have misplaced priorities so that monies are lost. In fact, it is not as if money is not dedicated and assigned. If you look at the stories that have been coming out of Africa, whether it's Kenya, whether it's Malawi, whether it's Uganda, whether it's Nigeria, South Africa, you can name them all. You can see the level of embezzlement and wastage. So that money is actually dedicated, perhaps not to the levels that we want, but dedicated. But we have this penchant for people in public office to privatize public wealth. And one of our biggest problems, and I would wish to be contradicted with this, our sense of outrage as a people is at the lowest ebb. We, as the people who are led, we are not angry. I don't see Nigerians angry because money has been embezzled. I don't see Kenyans who are angry. I don't see Ugandans who are angry. I don't see angry South Africans. I don't see angry angry Malawians. What I see is outrage in Twitter, which peters away after one day, outrage in Facebook. But you compare that with the outrage that we see in Europe, for example, the outrage that we see being demonstrated in the United States of America or in India. It is not only on a single day, but is sustained. So in a nutshell, I think that we have a crisis of leadership and we also have a crisis of followership. And until the day we do that, we will have declarations, we'll have protocols and all the things that you and me are familiar with, but we will continue to underachieve.
Yeah, that's painful to listen to, but it's also true. I mean, we in South Africa used to look at Zimbabweans when Robert Mugabe was around, and we used to say, but these people don't get angry. What's going on? Look at what their leadership is doing to their country. But it's happening to South Africa now. We, as you say, we complain on social media and we feel good about ourselves. But what really has to happen in Africa is the establishment of real independent democratic institutions that are not led by presidents. I think we give too much power to men and women in politics, Prof. We need institutions that will curb their powers, that will make sure that anybody who goes rogue on any country in Africa is stopped by independent institutions. Right now, in too many areas in Africa, the presidents, the heads of state are the institutions. They can pick up the phone, call the head of the IC or the Chief Justice and tell them this is how it's going to roll. Don't you think the changes that are needed are systemic?
Without doubt, they are systemic. And we bandy around this word democracy. And I think that is part of our problem. So that when, after the collapse of the Berlin Wall, which is what we use as our marker, that is when the whole process of democracy articulate in Africa started to gain traction. Democracy was then presented to mean multi-party politics, to mean separation of powers, and I have no quarrel with that, to mean an active civil society, to mean periodic elections, so that if you look at many African countries today, they are able to tick the boxes. Right. One of the things that we did not articulate is to recognize that democracy also demands a population that is sensitized, that is aware, that makes demands of those who are in power. And remember that many African states find themselves in a unique position. First of all, we have inherited Machian boundaries in 1884. You now have people in Nigeria, over 200 or 500 ethnicities or languages, in South Africa. And African states our nations or African states are struggling to be states and are struggling because you find there are different nations. Come to South Africa. You have the Zulu nation, the Xhosa nation, the Pedi nation, Venda nation. Go to Angola, is the Ovambo and the Ovumbundu. And if an Ovambo is in government still, the Ovumbundu will say that is our thief. So all these things stand in the way of our realization of what we need. And that is how we have systemic problems.
Right.
Even our whole idea of what a government ought to do. You send your sons and daughters into government as if they were hunters to go into government and hunt and deliver home. We must redefine our understanding of democracy, define our understanding of what governments are constituted for and what deliverables they are supposed to put on the table in agriculture, in health, and all sectors of the economy. I agree with you. It is systemic.
But do you think also that African norms and traditions make it hard for Africa to embrace what people call a modern democracy? Is it, one from time to time hears people saying, but this democracy is Western. It doesn't take into consideration the way we are in Africa, the way we live, the way we do things. But again, some of these norms that we embrace, in my view, tend to be archaic. Africa can never return to 1825 or 16 something. We need to modernize Africa without losing our Africanness. Is there a way to be modern and African at the same time?
Oh yeah, Solly, sometimes, and I hope you'll agree with me on this, and the audience will also agree with me on this. Sometimes we talk about Africa as if Africa and modernity cannot be used in one sentence. Nana Kobinan Kesia, who is a Ghanaian and a traditional ruler and a former professor at the University of Cape Coast, has written a book, Governance and Democracy in Africa, the Ghanaian Paradigm. And he argues, and I agree with him, that there is nothing incompatible with African institutions and democracy. If democracy is defined to mean people participation in their governance systems. And it need not take one form. In other words, there is no one size fits all democracy. Democracy must be about people participation, and people participation in a manner that makes the people the guarantors of those who are in political power. And I hold the view that even in traditional African societies, which were fundamentally monarchical, there is a sense in which the people's views would be sought and obtained. Right. So that if in a particular area was responsible, he would go to the clan elders, and decisions were therefore democratic decisions. And every system of government reforms itself. Look at the history of Europe. The history of Europe was absolute monarchs. Then the Europeans killed all their monarchies from Norway to Russia and came up with constitutional monarchies, and we now have what Europe calls the modern democracy, because there was a process of reform. Perhaps what we need to do in Africa is to go back to the basics. You will see, for example, in a number of countries, if you allow me, look at the crisis in Africa as I speak now. Ethiopia is in a crisis because the Tigray think that the center is not accommodating enough. The Oromo have a problem, the Amhara have a problem, in Nigeria the same thing, in Cameroon the same thing, and in Sudan the same thing. What therefore I want us to engage in by way of debate is to do a number of things, to recognize, as was recognized in 1963 in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, that the inherited boundaries are problematic, even artificial. But if you begin to dismember them, the chaos that would be unleashed would be monumental. And that therefore, if we accept, for example, that South Africa remains the way it is, what we want Pretoria government to do is to make the Zulu feel that it is good to be part of South Africa. De-emphasize the center and make people govern themselves in day-to-day matters, so that the center is only a coordinator, the center is left with defense, the center is left with policy definition, and all other things are done fundamentally by the subsidiarities, as you see happening quite successfully, in my view, in Switzerland. So what the English would then call confederal structures. That is what I think we should do. But otherwise, I see nothing wrong, because the only constant thing in human affairs is change. Change that is informed by the realities without undermining the bedrock.
Okay, Prof, if we were to do that in South Africa, it means that we would be going back to our Bantu stance. Nobody wants to go back to Bantu stance.
No, not at all. Not at all. Nobody is talking about Bantustanization a la apartheid Africa, but one is talking about devolution. And you, if you allow me just this, look at South Africa divided into 9 provinces. If you go into Eastern Cape, if you go into Western Cape, you go to Free State, you go into Limpopo, you like that the administration in Limpopo is pretty much responsible for the mundane things that affect you and me. So that the Pretoria government is lean, mean, and efficient.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mr. Moeng, if this was radio or television, we would say we'll take a commercial break for you guys to have a cup of tea or water. But I'd like to barge in here. Professor is saying something very profound about going back to basics. Now, Prof, going back to basics, we know the basics was clouded and loaded with a whole lot of good things and elements such as Ubuntu that says I am because you are. Now, with the government and everything that's going wrong, Ubuntu and ethics, is there a marriage there? Because it looks like we've lost the ethics. And if we go back to basics, we need to embrace Ubuntu. And where will ethics fit in this instance?
You know, brother, there is one thing that I like about the American Declaration of Independence, because it defied race. Of course, the people who sat at that table in Philadelphia were themselves very racist. But in some way, they were able to ascend on a totally different level and said, we hold this truth to be self-evident, that all men are born equal, that they are endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And that it is for this reason that governments are instituted amongst men to achieve things that they declared, and that if governments don't achieve those things, then it's the right of the people to overthrow such a government. And if you look at African societies and you talk about Ubuntu, you know, you just have to go to drive in Johannesburg or Maputo to know that you need the other road user, and that therefore your own safety demands, among other things, that you are conscious of a number of people who are using the road simultaneously. The other road user, the person who is the pedestrian, the cyclist, the motorcyclist. And it is for your own selfish, if you may, reasons that you've got to obey the traffic rules. And African society had this as something that was woven in the cultural tapestry. Even when you cooked a meal in an African society, you made extra for the unexpected guest. This is how Africa operated. And these things I've lost, and it is my countryman, Ali Mazrui, who came up with this idea in his Africa Triple Heritage, that when we embraced what he called Westernization or Europeanization, we became individualistic. And when we became individualistic, he called it from the ballot to the boudoir, from one man, one vote to one man, one wife, he said. And he said it tongue in cheek, but he was making a point, so that we were no longer responsible for our neighbors. If you go to the leafy suburbs in any African society, the first thing you want to do is to erect a wall, and you do not know who your neighbor is. Compare that to the village. Compare that to how you work in the village and how the cooperative system works. So I can't agree with you more that this thing called Ubuntu, which in my view, we have not even articulated as we should, articulated in a clear manner so that it is cascaded to the people, that they understand that it is something that is compatible with what we call modernity. Sometimes now when I hear Ubuntu, people talk about Ubuntu, it's as if it was some fossilized behavior that used to take place several centuries ago, and that it can only be revived momentarily, yet it is part of our lives. You and me who are talking here, how many times in the next few minutes will you be sending money to your rural villager? Because it is part of Ubuntu. You are a millionaire in the town, but when you go to the village, they don't care about your millions. They only know that one of our brothers who has more advantage than us has a duty almost to take care of us. And Ubuntu is the very essence of it.
Prof, you know, a few weeks ago, a very prolific South African political commentator and analyst wrote an article, and in that article he was saying, you know, we South Africans have been Africanized by the ANC. In other words, at the dawn of our democracy, we thought we were going to be this awesome democracy that's going to lead, that's going to hold the torch high and be followed by the rest of the continent. What the ANC has done over the past 26 years, 27 years, has been to bring us back to who we are. What we are seeing is basically coming back home to Africa. That's a really pain. When I read that article, I don't know what to do with it. I mean, what do we want to be known for as Africans? Who can decide that? How must we always be known for the negative, for the hurt, for the corruption, for killing one another, for all these negative things that are happening? What needs to happen for us to make a turnaround, to agree that there's a turnaround is needed? And how can it be let out?
Solly, I can see you are frozen. I hope that I've understood your question well. Yeah, now I can hear you.
Okay.
You know, there are two things that I want to bring to the table. When we listen to particularly Western media, one would get the impression that some of these negatives are uniquely African. De-emphasizing what you are saying, let me also remind ourselves that the problems are fundamentally human. During your own lifetime, you watched what was happening in Latin America, the chaos that visited every single country in Latin America, be it Brazil, Argentina, Chile, Peru, Honduras, Nicaragua, all of them were in chaos under the narco countries. So that Latin America at one time, it was said a bit that coup d'etats were as frequent as breakfast.
Yeah.
I'm giving this example to demonstrate two of these are not equally African. Secondly, during your lifetime, you've seen the collapse of the Soviet Union and the creation of very many of these countries. And we know the ongoing problems in Georgia, Chechnya, Ukraine. In Asia, we know what is happening in Myanmar. We saw what was happening in East Timor. In the Arab world, you know that there is an unstable Iraq, there is an unstable Syria, there is an unstable Yemen. So that I want to answer this question in context, that this is a problem of humanity. And Africa, unfortunately, does not tell her story, her good stories. And they are good stories. They are good stories because you go to rural Africa in a number of countries, you see people are doing great things. The only problem is that we don't define ourselves. Who defines us? Al Jazeera. It is CNN. It is BBC, it is Radio Deutsche Welle, it is Radio France. But right. It is also true that in certain areas we could have done better. Look at Zimbabwe. One of the greatest African freedom fighters, Robert Gabriel Mugabe, did amazing things, ought to have left the stage a little earlier, 10 years in my view, we should have left, because after 10 years, it was a downward spiral. And the Zimbabweans have never recovered from it. And I remember these words. On the eve of independence, Mwalimu Nyerere of Tanzania told Mugabe, you have inherited a good thing, don't mess it up. If wherever they are, you must be told, but you messed it up. But there is also a combination of the sanction. But the sanctions is not the only reason. We know that certain things were just not done right. And right. This could be a very long answer, but I want to say something to come directly You know, in Southern Africa, you have a number of bodies or organizations which were freedom fighting movements. This is SWAPO, this is MPLA, this is Frelimo, this is ANC, this is ZANU-PF, and when you come to Eastern Africa, you find in SPLM. This freedom fighting movement have found it very difficult to transition from freedom fighting movements into democratic political parties. So that those who are participants, and most of them are still alive in freedom fighting movement, do not see themselves as the servants of the people. They see themselves as the liberators of the people who can do no wrong and who are owed by the people. Until the day that they jettison that attitude, African countries are going to underachieve. What you and me call corruption, they will not define as corruption. They simply think they are compensating themselves for the days that they were in the bush. And when you talk to them in the unguarded moments, that is how they think. It is only very few of them who have succeeded in having that transition. And in this regard, I must mention Sam Nujoma in Namibia, who succeeded in transitioning, went into retirement, and Namibia, with all our problems, is moving in some useful direction. I know that there is the land problem. The other second thing is that many African countries continue to be client states. If you look at former French colonies, and I saw President Macron speaking at the funeral of President Déby Itno, you would think in his mind, Chad is a province of France. He talks as if this is his fiefdom. And you see that France has continued to treat her former colonies as if they were, they call them territoire d'outre-mer. These are foreign territories. And one may say, but yes, one may say, but you regained independence. But the truth is that the international economic architecture is designed in such a way that if you want to run away from that web, this internationalist neocolonialists find a way of isolating you and dealing with you firmly and swiftly. Any examples? Yes, Patrice Emery Lumumba. Any examples? Thomas Sankara. In other words, they still can squeeze you. And why can they squeeze us? Because we are divided into 55 weak states. And Nkrumah warned us in 1963, if we don't unite now, the neo-colonizer will come and will manipulate us and create conflicts and emphasize our ethnic differences and blow them out of proportion. So yes, Solly, I agree. We have corruption, we have bad governance, we are underachieving, we are co-authors of our own misfortune. And that is why some of us are now saying that although we may not be heard at our most eloquent, that the only thing that we can do is to immunize ourselves by collapsing the boundaries, initially through trade, through bodies like SADC, like ECOWAS, like COMESA, like IGAD, like East African Community, like the Maghreb, and much more recently, Africa Continental Free Trade Area. In that way, we will be able to resist Europe, we'll be able to resist China, we'll be able to resist all of them, not by way of isolating ourselves. That resistance will be one that is designed to level the playing field so that when we negotiate, we don't negotiate rather.
I don't know, you froze there a little bit. I don't know if it's just on my side, Prof.
Yes, he did. I hope he will bounce
you
back.
Froze with, you also froze a little bit, but we got the bulk of what you said, Prof.
Okay.
Question.
You got the bulk. Okay.
Yes, you only froze right at the end, which is fine. Prof.
I was saying that to make that point. Okay, come on, Solly.
Yeah, I'm very happy that you acknowledge that we are co-authors of our, a lot of times in Africa, and it happens a lot in South Africa, I can tell you this, we blame apartheid, we blame colonialism, we blame white people, we blame everybody else. We never look at the things that people who look like us are doing to Africa. We have the AU in Africa. I don't know what the AU is doing. I must be honest with you. I see people go there, they meet every year, they have good times. And if you and I'm putting a lot of things into a basket here now. Muammar Gaddafi, we can have a different discussion about who he was and what he stood for. He was one of the men who pushed for a united Africa. I don't know what he had in mind about that. But if the Prof, tomorrow, somebody were to say, or the Africans will come together and say, Prof, we would like you to lead the AU. Maybe let's not call it the AU, let's call it something, a body that is going to oversee the changes that are needed to make Africa modern and winning, to make Africa stand up and be counted, so that it stands peer to peer with others. What are the 2 or 3 or 4 first things that you would do as a governor of Africa, as it were?
I hear you, Solly. Of course, you restrict me to 2, but one of the things that makes Africa weak is to rely and to denominate our entire trade on foreign currencies. Everything is dollar denominated or euro denominated. It means our goods and services as we know them are dictated, the price of our goods are dictated from outside. One of the things that I would do is to ensure that we move towards a single African currency and a single African market. Because once you unlock the economic situation, then in many ways, it will begin to unlock many other things. You will agree with me that even political instability is essentially a product of economic problems. Because if you are in control of your affairs economically, and you are able to define what you want, then Moody's, take for example, credit rating. Today, an organization which is alien to us is capable of simply saying they have given you a CC credit rating, and you are immediately ostracized from the international money market. And you only have to ask Zimbabwe, that Zimbabwe, because it was ostracized from the world money market, Zimbabwe cannot create employment. Political instability is a problem there of the low intensity kind. Food cannot be availed. The health sector is affected. The education sector is affected. So number 1, create a one free trade zone. Number 2, ensure that we move towards free movement of labor. Number 3, make sure that we move towards a single market. Number 3, make sure that you allow labor to move across Africa and have harmonized policies on how we deal with our natural resources. And once we do those as the bedrock, we then are going to look at African institutions, whether it's the African Development Bank, whether it's the African Union, whether it is all these units that we need for purposes of articulating our positions. Then I tell you, we'll then go to the question of governance, political governance, because that also can be a disruptor. If you have all these, then governance can be improved. And how do you improve governance? You improve governance by empowering the people.
Right.
Just one thing that I want to say before you weigh in. Look at Scandinavian countries. I was just looking. Norway, with a population of anything between, I think, 6 million population. But the soft fund is 1 trillion, 1 trillion, which means that it is possible notionally to give every Norwegian about $100,000, and he's building. And when a political leader makes a mistake in Norway, in Denmark, in Sweden, in Finland, the people rise immediately. And because the culture is so deeply rooted, the individual will resign. Oh, ask any African country that they have paid money out of their pocket or they have gone for a holiday using public funds. They just wonder what you are talking about. So I think the population, let us not ignore that democracy also thrives and is guaranteed by population that is sensitive. People can say, because it's for health, embezzled money and has built a mansion in Cape Town, in Maputo, in Nairobi, and in Malawi. That is why we don't have COVID vaccines in the hospital. That connection they must be able to make. That the Minister for Roads did the same thing. That is why they are pothole. Until the day that the people are capable of recognizing that, then we'll always have people whose desire is to keep the people in perpetual ignorance for their own safety.
You know, I just love you. I love what you've just said. Here's the thing. Creating one African currency is, I totally support everything you just said, but the issue of cultures, there are certain things that are accepted, that are tolerated in some African countries that are not tolerated in African countries. I could take a random example. So you could take somebody, if I were to say, let's open a branch of my company in Uganda, and I want to send the CEO there who's LGBTIQ, they will not be accepted. But we don't need to focus on that. The point I'm making is we have to normalize not just the currency, we have to normalize border controls, we have to normalize other things that make it hard for Africans to operate in some countries and not in other countries. But I get the feeling, and this is my question, I get the feeling that the changes that we need in Africa will not come from those who are in power, because it's in their interest to keep things, their fiefdoms, as it were, as they are, because they benefit from them. The change must come from the bottom. The African civil societies across the continent need to come together and demand a better deal. Don't you think? Did you get that, Prof?
Yeah, I can hear you. Two things, two views here, and I would want somebody who holds a different view to weigh in. Also, the truth is enlightened leader, then it's easier to introduce change. If you have enlightened leader, is a shorter route. And the examples of countries like Burkina Faso during Thomas Sankara was a very good thing. That because he was enlightened, because he had the desire to change, you can do it within a very short time. John Joseph Pombe Magufuli, also within a very short time, he could make certain changes. And this is a shorter route. When the change comes from the bottom and is resisted by the political elite, sometimes it leads to bloodshed. And that is why the desire of the people is that leaders who are enlightened should be moved in the right direction. What, for example, President Lazarus McCarthy Chakwera did in Malawi 2 weeks ago, by simply coming out and say, I know my minister refunded the money, is not much money, but I'm relieving him of his position regardless. He's from my party, but I'm relieving him because I want to send a message. You know, that act by the president itself is more than 20 years of civic education on corruption, because it sends a very clear message to the political elite that you will not be a sacred cow. And I think, without disagreeing with you, that that is the shortest route. But as I said earlier, it is important that the people must organize themselves. Because when the people are organized and they make demands of the political leadership, then an enlightened and self-preserving political leadership will also respond to that stimulus. But the problem with the African civil society, and some of them, not all of them, some of them are very good, but to the extent that we have the problem of funding from Western Europe, the agenda is always a moving target. And because the agenda is always a moving target, once there's a time when they focus on human rights, they focus on climate change, and to that extent, you cannot rely on the civil society as the one that will change the environment in the manner that we want. I see somebody saying that we pick out a few questions from the audience which they had sent in. So I hope we'll do that. But I agree with Yumo that sustainable change demands a combination of efforts from the political leadership, from the civil society, from the citizenry, and all these conjoined will serve and help to move the agenda forward. But history has demonstrated that when the people make a demand, and this is contemporary history, in Somalia, just a week ago, The Prime Minister and Parliament chose to extend the life. And the people came into the streets, and it has been reversed. The Prime Minister has reversed it, which tells you that the people have power, that when they make demands, the political leadership will know. And some of the people with the greatest survival instincts in Africa are politicians. When they are threatened and threatened properly, then their survival instinct will tell them we either give way or will be consumed. Of course, some are recalcitrant. You can't do anything about it.
Yeah, that's very true. We should then, Victor, can I just one question to the Prof, and then we'll open to the public. Just one.
Great.
Prof, let's maybe just briefly about China. Do you think that African leaders are giving a lot more to China in whatever deals they're signing with China than they should? Are we being indebted for the next 5, 4, 6 generations of Africans to China because of the the deals?
In the early days, about 2 years ago, I was very angry with China. So I was in this China bashing. Then 2 years ago, I think 2 years ago, I watched the Chinese Politburo, 6,000 men and women sitting in Beijing in a most orderly meeting, determining and saying how they are going to deal with the rest of the world in the next 100 years. Which meant that none of them who sat there was going to be alive. But they are thinking about their country 100 years from thence. Then I knew that these are people who know what they want and they know what their people want. It is intergenerational. And then I said that it is the duty of Africans to also define what they want. We must define what we want. The Arabs must define what they want. Everybody must define what they want, so that when we meet with the Chinese and we are negotiating in a manner that will ensure that they benefit, because they also want to benefit, but in a manner that we also want to benefit. And the tragedy with many of our African leaders is that they don't negotiate. I'm using the word negotiate very loosely. They negotiate from a position of weakness, and they are shown the dotted line. Has it been demonstrated that you can reject these loans? Yes. John Pombe Magufuli came into presidency, found that a contract had been signed with the Chinese for the building of the port of Bagamoyo. You'd remain indebted to them for 90 years. He rejected it. He found that the Mwalimu Nyerere hydroelectric dam had been given, I think, to the Chinese, or I may be wrong about this. He rejected it, gave it to the Egyptians. He found that the railway line had been given to the Chinese. He rejected it, gave it to the Turkish at almost half the cost. It means that if you know what you want, even the Chinese themselves, or indeed any other person, will go home saying, these ones have now come of age. And I think that going forward, this is what we must do. And I want to conclude with this example. You imagine Eswatini, the king of Eswatini, negotiating with Xi Jinping. I mean, there is no negotiation there. But if Eswatini were to negotiate in the context of SADC, or Lesotho were to negotiate in the context of SADC, so that the textile industry about which they are negotiating is specific to Lesotho, but you have big brother South Africa protecting you there. You have Angola there. You have the 14 there. You will not be manipulated. But many of these people, and Britain is now very good at this. I know we are talking about China. Post-Brexit, you can now see the British coming to negotiate bilaterally. They don't want to negotiate with SADC. They don't want to negotiate with ECOWAS. They don't want to negotiate with East African Community, because they know when they isolate you, then they can manipulate you. And you, Solly, and many others in this forum know about negotiation. It's not for the faint-hearted. It is for people who know what they want. I can see Moremo Golo has been raising his or her hand for some time. He ought to be allowed into this debate.
Right, thank you so much, Prof. Thank you so much, Solly. We will take a few questions. There is Moremo Golo Leroke. May be brief, straight to the point, and ask a question. Thank you. Over to you.
I think they need to unmute themselves.
Okay, yeah. Okay, I'll just ask you to unmute. Ma'am Remogolo.
Yes, sir.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you very
Go
much.
ahead
Thank you
with the
very much.
question.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Prof. What a beautiful presentation. I'm Remaholo, and I'm a member of the academia. Just one question, one or two questions. I'm going to be very, very brief. Prof, what challenges really face participatory democracy in Africa? Two, do you, in your opinion, believe that Africa's regional organizations have played their part in articulating the themes that you've just presented? Now, we are a public relations institution of Southern Africa, and I'm saying, what role can we play in rebranding and reimaging Africa for this beloved continent? Thank you, Prof.
Wow.
Thank you. Solly, you want me to weigh in first?
Yeah.
Thanks.
I think, the challenges that face Africa, unfortunately, are known to us. One of them is what I now call negative ethnicity. And the politicians in many countries, when they are bankrupt of ideas, what they do is to mobilize their people around ethnicity and sometimes around religion. And when they do that, then they undermine democracy, and ideas are not the things that then occupy center stage. And you'll see it in a number of countries, including my own country, Kenya. When you look at what we call political parties, they are actually an alliance of low voltage ethnic warlords who have mobilized their populations and who are telling them, when I become the president, then all the things that you used to hear called El Dorado, the land of gold, will be known unto you. That is ethnic mobilization. There is also religious mobilization, and we can see that what I call political Islam, not Islam. Islam, the religion, is very innocent, but political Islam, which is being used by people who are not, in my view, Muslim, is used to galvanize people that when we unroll the carpet and Islamize and Arabize the countries or the continent, then things will come to you, so that democracy doesn't matter. The other thing that stands in the way of realizing the dividends of democracy is corruption. The assumption that political office is a site for material aggrandizement. And we see that, as I said a little earlier, in countries which are being governed by former freedom movements, where those freedom movements, even when they characterize themselves as political parties, have yet to jettison the DNA of freedom fighting movement, with the consequence that they think that the countries owe them rather than that they are serving the country. I think that combination, ethnicity, religion in its jaundiced form, and this entitlement by certain people in the political class are the things that stand in the way of our realizing the fuller dividends of democracy. And the fourth thing is ignorance. The majority, it used to be said in the days of Karl Marx when I was a student, that the safety of the bourgeois demands that the proletariat be kept in the most profound ignorance. And I think, without using those terms, it is true that ignorance is one of the things that is perpetuated by the people. And you can see this particularly when you look at national broadcasters. They are almost indoctrinating propagandist institutions which want to tell one side of the story. And if there is any media that wants to tell a contra story, then they are accused of undermining the stability of the nation. So those things, in my view, as I've said, ethnicity or political religion or politicization of religion, entitlement and ignorance, in my view, stand in the way of the fuller realization of the dividends of democracy. The second question, regional organization. I mean, East Africa, I'll start with East African Community. East African Community 1, which was a 1967 body, which was disbanded, came alive in 1990. And if you look at the constitutive acts of the East African Community, says that we'll start with a common market, then we'll move into a common currency and ultimately a political union. Right now, courtesy of intervention from the United States of America, Britain, European Union, and Russia, while the Treaty of the East African Community says that none of the entities shall engage in bilateral, unilateral negotiation on trade matters, Kenya is engaged in trade with the UK bilaterally and unilaterally, engaged with the United States bilaterally and unilaterally. They have ignored that particular treaty. So fidelity. And as I speak with the Inter-East African Community, Uganda is suspicious of Rwanda, Rwanda is suspicious of Burundi, and vice versa. Tanzania is also suspicious of Kenya. South Sudan has its own problem, so that the regional bodies are also weak because you don't have champions for them. In the early days, you had champions for them, so that East Africa, we had the East African Airways, we had the East African Lay Ports and Services, East African Telecommunication, and movement was free in the 60s and the 70s. A Ugandan would work in Tanzania and vice versa, and Kenyan in Tanzania and Uganda without any need for a passport. So what am I saying? I'm saying that the regional bodies, whether they are SADC, whether they are ECOWAS, whether they are East African Community, whether they are Central Africa, whether they are Maghreb, up to 1/10 of their country. And this is very sad. It is sad because the net effect is that people don't make decisions. I use, for example, right now, you know that poultry and poultry products from South Africa have been banned in Namibia. I think they are banned in quite a number of South African countries because of avian flu. But if the bees were collaborating in a useful way, it would be done very different. You would have rules of origin and all those things. So in a nutshell, I'm saying that the regional organizations have underperformed. Yet, this is in the face of clear treaty provisions, in the face of clear protocol provisions, in the face of clarity on issues of taxes, on the face of clarity of movement of labor. And this is something that I hope will be addressed. As I conclude, I know, for example, that since the month of January this year, your own countryman, Wamkele Mene, who is now the CEO of African Continental Free Trade Area, sits in Addis Ababa, rather sits in Accra in Ghana. With the with him, brother, this position requires a crusader. You are going to annoy heads of state, you are going to annoy people, and you may even not complete your term, but try to ensure that one of the things we do is to collapse these borders, coordinate the regional bodies so that they make sense. I want SADC to make sense to Ababa in Luanda in Angola, to make sense to somebody who is in Nampula in Mozambique, or somebody who is in Bambane. Otherwise, it becomes simply a jamboree of leaders every 1 year without more. So in a nutshell, I can't agree with you more that the regional bodies could do better.
Wow,
Prof,
thank you so much, Prof.
Just a quick comment.
Yeah, all right.
You know, I'm seeing a question from Abdullah Ba from Sierra Leone and from Gina there, but they speak to the same, you know, Prof, you mentioned earlier, you made a reference to countries in Scandinavia, how the population is informed, how it works together, how it stands up to say no. You gave another African example as well. And I could say the same thing in Africa. In South Africa, we always say if we don't unite, we can never get the kind of change that we want from the government that runs this country. The same thing can be sent out through the African continent. If we as Africans don't unite, we can't. First of all, we need to unite and define who we want to be so that others don't define us. We define ourselves. Not only should we be demanding to be respected for who we are from outsiders, but also the people who lead the African continent. A lot of the people that we just mentioned who are put into these regional organizations are usually appointed by the same corrupt leaders that we are not happy with. And they can be fired any day. So they're at the beck and call of these people. That's why I truly believe, Prof, that the people of Africa need to find another way. We can't keep trying the same thing over and over again and hope for change. We need strong civil society movements across the continent. We need to define what we want from our leaders, and we need to stand up together in solidarity when leadership in any country goes rogue on its people.
Okay. Now, thank you so much, Mr. Moeng. I think you had just covered what Abdullah had asked, but just for the benefit of all other attendees, Abdullah says he's Abdullah Baha from Sierra Leone, and his question is, why is it that African leaders don't like leading by example? African leaders are corrupt, and why we, the electorate, elect people who are corrupt, and we want them to fight corruption in the end when we know that they are corrupt? Why are Africans so blind and cannot see the reality that is happening in other countries in Europe? Okay, I think a question that is also related to that is that where do Gina Sego says it goes without saying that most African leaders, if not all, are so corrupt. How will a united Africa reduce or eradicate corruption? Prof, how will you, as a leader of United Africa, deal with the issues of corruption? I think this will be the last question for Prof to take. And then for the ease of reference, Prof, the question is on the chat, so you can refer to that as well. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much. You know, the truth is that, and I say this almost ad nauseum, that the human beings given power and privilege may be inclined to abuse power and privilege. And that is why in every country in the world that you and me know of, there are checks and balances and there are laws that are designed to make abuse of privilege a painful affair. But laws in and of themselves are not sufficient. It is fidelity to those laws that makes the laws useful for purposes of improving society. What we have seen in many African countries is what may be characterized as impunity, that people will do things that they know are completely immoral and unlawful, but because they know that that will not invite any pain, they will continue to do it until the absurd becomes the norm. What we must do as a country and as a people and as a continent is to make sure that the law is followed, and if it is not followed, there are consequences to it. Look at China. If you are caught and an allegation of corruption is made and is proven against you, they'll kill you. You'll be killed. You go to Europe, which has a history of corruption, and they learned that corruption is a very painful thing. Then the people demanded that if people engage in corrupt activities, then they are punished. One of the things that we don't do in Africa is that we don't punish people. And because we don't punish people, impunity takes in. I'll give an example of a Nigerian called James Ibori. I can say this because this is the public domain. He became a governor. He was accused of having engaged in criminal activities in the United Kingdom. He came back to Nigeria. He was elected as a governor, and he became a very rich man. And then he was never arrested in Nigeria. He went to Dubai and to buy an aircraft, I'm told. That is when he was arrested by the British authorities. He went to the United Kingdom. He was charged, he was convicted, and he has completed his term. When he went back to Nigeria, he was received with ululation. And I wouldn't be surprised if he seeks public office in the year 2023. So we must make a choice. And in this regard, you and me who have had the advantage of school are also part of the problem, because it is we who get appointed into public offices. And if you try to do the right thing, the mortality rate of people who try to do the right things in public spaces is very high, because you find yourself, as is said in the good book, as a sheep among wolves. What we must do, therefore, going forward, and what I would do, is to ensure that we have laws which we respect. Are there countries where that is happening? Yes, there are countries where that is happening. I know that the Botswana are doing a good thing in the fight against corruption. Let us also talk about those. I know that the Namibians are doing something about it. I know right now in Angola, the Shanto families is facing some charges because of that. I know in Rwanda, they are doing something about it. I know in Malawi, they are doing something about it. I know in Tanzania, they are doing something about it. So we should, even as we talk about these negatives in Africa, also occasionally showcase some of the things, the positive things that are happening in different parts of Africa. I'll give you a good example. You can sit in Maputo, sit in Joburg, sit in Cape Town, and apply to register a company in Kigali in Rwanda, and it will happen without you going to Kigali, because systems have been made to work. That is Africa for you. We should showcase that so that you don't have to go to benchmark in Denmark. You can benchmark on certain things in Rwanda, on certain things in Uganda. Recently, for example, Uganda have oil. They were getting guidance from Total in France until they discovered that there are people in Sonangol, in Angola, who had even better expertise. So I agree with you, we have a problem there, but you and me have a duty also to showcase some of the good things that are happening in the continent of Africa.
Where's Victor?
Yeah, all right. Okay. Thank you so much, Prof.
There is a question that I want to answer. This
yes.
is a question number. When is he, I think that means me, when is he converting his rhetoric into action? I want to confront that question. I want to confront it because, yes, you know, sometimes people hear us, Solly, many others talk, and they do not know that on the ground. I keep on telling people, when you want to judge somebody, go to my rural village, ask them, do you know something that is doing to improve the quality of people's life? You go to my village, you'll be told that something is happening. You go to the estate where I live in Nairobi, ask them, is he participating with? Yes, they'll tell you. Come to Kenya, even my enemies will say, yes, he's trying to do something. Go into the 38 African countries where we are present as a foundation. Ask the young man with whom I work, is he trying to do something? So I think that beyond the statements that we make in our own small way, there are things that we are doing on the ground. And the very fact, Solly will tell you how we met. Because when you are doing things for the continent, you meet kindred spirits. And those kindred spirits help you. A webinar or a meeting such as this is also a meeting of kindred spirits. There are certain things in which Solly is strong and I'm weak. There are certain things in which I'm weak is strong. And that is true of all of us. So that beyond this conversation, what can we do jointly to strengthen one another? Because all of us are with fault. In fact, it is the famous French philosopher Saint-Just who said, nobody can govern guiltlessly. And having recognized that, when I meet Solly, I de-emphasize his weakness and I emphasize his strengths. And he too does that. And in that way, we strengthen each other. Right now, I belong to over 30 Pan-African institutions, 30 of them. And I love it because it is indicative of the fact that people are angry and hungry. They want Africa to unite. But I was telling them that perhaps now what we should do, because each one of us thinks we are the best, we are doing the best, perhaps shouldn't we have a clearinghouse where each one of us is aware of what the other is doing, and even without abandoning our institutions, we are aware and we can find an area of collaboration and cooperation. Somebody also asked the question, what is the future of whites in South Africa? And I will answer that question. The question, Robert Sobukwe, speaking in 1960 said, there is only one race, the human race. And I agree with Sobukwe. The only thing that we should do is to create an environment where people are judged, as Martin Luther King would have said, not by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. And in doing that, it is also important that we address historical injustices. We cannot pretend, and I'm very clear about this, we cannot pretend to forget the past without addressing the injustices. And the grievances that you see in quite a number of African countries, South Africa is one of them, Zimbabwe is one of them, or Namibia is one of them, is that there are certain unresolved historical injustices, even in Kenya here, particularly about land. All those issues must be addressed. It will be painful, but if you don't address them intergenerationally, there will always be problems.
Wow, thank you so much, Professor. Thank you for your time and your contribution. I think I should say this in Kiswahili and make Solly jealous. Mzee Lumumba, asante kwa muda na mchango. Thank you very much for your time and your participation. Yeah, asante mzee.
Asante sana.
Asante
sana na Mungu atujalie.
Yeah, and to all our guests, thank you for your attendance. And just for the benefit of Professor, I know he can hear English, but to those that speak Kiswahili, kwa wageni wetu asante kwa muduria yako. So thank you for your attendance and for being with us. Solly, I must just hand over to you. But before I do that, we will be having a lot of these webinars on a monthly basis on the last Thursday of every month, and the next one will be on the 27th of May, and we will be focusing on energy, Africa and energy, because that is a huge challenge we have. And the next one in June will be quite exciting because we're talking education and skills development. What will Africa
I can now say Nkosi Kakulu.
Nkosi Kakulu. Zikomo kwambili. Solly, over to you just to wrap it up and also extend a special word of thanks to the professor and the guests.
I'm going to learn Swahili. Watch this space. Prof, thank you so very much. All of you who joined us, Victor, for making this discussion so amazingly smooth. I thank you very much. You know, like I said when I began, we don't want to just talk. And I'm very happy that somebody asked the Prof, but what are you doing on the ground? And he's explained what he's doing on the ground. I know that he's doing other things that I'm not mentioning here because he will mention, you will see them over time. We have to work together as Africans. We have to decide what we want to be known for. We have to decide what we want from our leaders. We can't constantly be trying the same things over and over again and try and hope for different outcomes. Somebody asked about the role of education and making reference to the fact that a lot of the people, especially here in South Africa, who stole from us are highly educated people. There's a difference between being academically trained and qualified and being ethical. And that is a problem. So if you give people all the academic qualifications you want, but you don't entrench ethical leadership, ethical conduct in institutions, especially people who occupy influential positions in the public, then you're going to end up with the kind of things we've seen. State capture in South Africa, so the most decorated engineers and lawyers and whatnot stealing from us. So there's a role to play for us. We need to demand that. And those who are asking about PR communications, let's have conversations in one of our seminars about what the PR fraternity, communication fraternity can do to change the narrative around Africa. But we have to change that by changing the way we view ourselves, by being clear about what we want from our leaders. Because you can't spin doctor, right? Public relations is about communicating. Once we decide this is what you want to be known for, then you have to isolate the wrong from the good. You have to be speak out against wrong. You shouldn't participate against wrong, even if there's money at the end of the stick. Some of you in the public relations should know about Bell Pottinger, which took hundreds of millions from the South African, people who were involved in state capture. But where are they now? They're gone. So we need to really be able to self-control, but to lead because we want to plan for Africa in the next 100 years, like the Chinese are doing. It shouldn't be just about how many millions I'm getting now. It should be what kind of legacy do you want to leave for Africa for the next 3, 4 generations. So I would like to thank you all for being part of these conversations. We're going to be doing them, as Victor said, every last Thursday of the month, and we are in partnership with PRISA, with the Patrick Lotso-Tieno Lumumba Foundation, right through the end. And in the end, in December, we're going to have our annual, which is really popular over the years, the Gala Awards dinner. So you will see the invitation for people to come and tell us who are doing awesome things in Africa, across Africa. We want individuals and companies and NGOs who are doing the kind of things that we look at as Africans and say, you know what, we are proud to be African. We need to celebrate those people. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mzee Solly. Asante sana. So thank you very much. And to all our participants, we had a very active follow-up on Facebook. We had over 105 people on Facebook watching live.
Wow.
And then we had a very interesting mixture of guests attending online. To you, Mr. Moeng, thank you so much for really giving me a vote of confidence to assist and run this. We did it. The beginning, and there's many more to come. Ladies and gentlemen, have a pleasant day. Enjoy your Thursday. I hope.
Can I just say?
Yes.
Yeah, just a quick. The link to this webinar has been recorded. Like all of them will be recorded. The link will be shared on the website, on the YouTube channel of the Africa Brain Summit for you to review or to share further if you want.
Alrighty. Okay. Thank you so much to everyone. All the active members. I see Limpopo is here. We actually had quite good representation. Namibia, Botswana, Limpopo, Zimbabwe. Yeah, very interesting one. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Have
Okay.
a pleasant
Bye-bye.
day.
Bye.
Bye.